Having looked at agency and that relationship when you delegate the ability to do something to someone else from a legal perspective, we're now going to look at some specific legal structures that are used in business when we set up an organisation. We're going to look at 4 specific types, moving from a quite simple structure to the most complex and the most used one, companies. So we're going to do sole trader, partnership, company, and then we're going to do another one called trust, which is an alternative way to arrange business affairs. Okay, so let's have a look at those. So when we start a business, one of the most important things that we have to do is decide on the business structure that we're going to use. As I've mentioned, we're going to look at 4 types of structure used in businesses: sole trader, partnership, trust, and the corporate structure or a company. And note that these structures aren't always mutually exclusive. That means you can use more than one at the same time. In particular, you can use a trust with other structures. Often a trust is used with a company structure. Why do we select a particular business structure? Well, it's because they have advantages and disadvantages. So we find that some structures are easier to set up, they're cheaper to set up. We might find that your liability changes, your legal liability and financial liability changes with the kind of structure. There are tax advantages to some structure, the ability to get more money to finance for expansion, for instance. And also there are different regulatory obligations between the structures. So the ongoing costs and burden vary between the structure. And it's a mix of these things that go into the decision about which structure to actually employ. So the first structure that we're going to look at is a sole trader. Now, a sole trader is simply where someone owns and operates the business by themselves, right? It's in their own name. And by name, I mean they are the person doing it. So they can employ people, but they're the sole owner, and it would be me, Gavin, employing you. Okay, there's no business structure between us. If you do that, then you will have sole responsibility for raising the money to start the business, but you have sole control over the operation of the business, and you're entitled to all of its profits. However, because you're operating as yourself, like in your own name or as your personal level, you will have unlimited personal liability for any debts and legal obligations. So that means that there's a higher liability in this kind of structure for you personally, okay, under most circumstances. But it's very easy to do. There's no formal legal requirements. So what can we see? If we look at a sole trader, there's very little formalities. You get full ownership, which means you can make all the decisions and get all the profits. However, you have unlimited personal liability. There's limited capital if you want to bring other people on board. How are you going to arrange that? And maybe you just don't have all the skills necessary to take the business forward, particularly when you start to expand. The next type of business that we want to talk about is a partnership. So a partnership involves at least 2 people. Okay, so there's at least 2 people, and what they're doing is owning and operating a business together. Now, this is a special legal relationship. The partners have mutual agency. So you'll remember our slides on agency law, okay? So the partners are both principals and agents of each other. Each partner is a principal and an agent of the other partners. That means they're all liable for the actions, contracts, and debts of the other partners. Now, a partnership is not a separate legal entity, but each partner has unlimited personal liability, not only for themselves, but for the debts of the partnership, okay? So while you're working with other people, you're actually increasing your liability in terms of what they do as well. Now, you don't need to take any formal steps to enter partnership. All that you require for a partnership is for people to be carrying on a business in common with a view to a profit. Okay, they're the elements of what we need. If these elements are satisfied, we have a partnership regardless of the stated intentions of the parties. So a partnership can exist even if people don't think so. This is a really important point. So if you're actually running a business with someone together, you can have a partnership and you can be held to have a partnership, even if you haven't signed an agreement, even if you don't think you have a partnership. Okay, so this definition, carrying on a business in common with a view to a profit, there are three elements to it, and they're actually central to this problem of a partnership arising when you may not have thought that one is there. So let's look at each of those terms. Okay, so there has to be more than one person for a partnership. There can be persons. There are some exceptions, but you can't have more than 20 partners in a partnership. You've got to be carrying on a business. That means there's got to be some repetition of trading. So for instance, renovating one house is not carrying on a business. Okay, renovating one house is not repetitive. Okay, that would be considered a joint venture. So you can renovate a house with someone and not be carrying on a business. But if you renovate several houses, okay, if you're renovating houses full time, then yes, you have this repetition of trading activity. So you've got to look about whether it's this ongoing nature of carrying on a business. You must be carrying on a business in common. So that means you've got to be doing it together with people acting on behalf of the others. So you've both got to be going out and kind of signing contracts and doing that thing. That's a question of fact. Are people entering contracts and doing that kind of thing for the business together with a view to a profit? So what does that mean? Non-profits aren't partnerships. So if you're doing it for charity, it won't be a partnership. But if you're doing it to make money, it can be. They're the three essential elements. You've got to be carrying on a business in common with a view to a profit. You have those three things, you can have a partnership. So we really want to be able to differentiate a partnership from a joint venture. So a joint venture is where people are cooperating on a project or undertaking. Notice this is kind of a single venture, okay? And they do not have mutual liability. You've got to be really careful about how you draft joint venture agreements, because if it's ongoing, there's a chance it may actually be a partnership, even if you call it a joint venture. Okay, it all comes back to whether you're carrying on a business. Okay. So partnerships can arise even if we don't think so. We've got to be careful if we enter joint ventures that we don't end up in a partnership. So the nature of the relationship between partners is that it's a contract. The terms of the contract may be set out in a partnership agreement. So you would, if you want to enter a partnership, you should have a formal document, a partnership agreement. So that would be a formal written document. However, it could be partly in writing and partly oral, or just from the conduct of the parties. So you don't need to have a document. Again, if you wanted to enter a partnership, you'd be very wise to actually have a document. So a written partnership agreement is not essential for a partnership, but it's a very good idea. Here are some of the factors that you might want to think about putting in any partnership agreement. The names of the partners, what the business is about, how long the partnership will go, what each partner is going to put in, how you're going to share profits and losses, what the authorities of the partners are, how big contracts can they sign, how do you make decisions, what are the duties and obligations you have to each other, are you going to allow new partners to enter, how do you get rid of a partner, or what happens if a partner dies, how are you going to resolve disputes. So it's really kind of thinking through how the partnership will run. And you're trying to foresee any problems you might have and agree how you'll solve those problems before they arise. So what are the advantages of a partnership? Okay, well, there's few formalities. It's pretty easy and low cost. You get more people to contribute ideas, right? And skills and capital and money, right? You also have privacy. Partnerships don't have to be registered with the government authority, so no one needs to know what you're actually doing if you're worried about that kind of thing. However, there are big disadvantages. The key one is unlimited personal liability. Not only that, but having mutual agency means you need to only be partners with people you trust, right? Because you're going to be liable for what they do. You also start to give up control in this type of structure. Okay, so we've looked at two of the more informal ways of running a business. The next video, we're going to look at the company structure, which is probably the most common form of structure for running a business.